Hey guys, my name's Nick and welcome back to the channel, and in this relatively quick video we're going to be putting together the Spoilpox Scrivenor. Now he is a bit of a buff unit to my Plaguebearer squad that I've already assembled. I'll put a little card up in the corner for you there, just so you can go back and see the painting guide to those Plaguebearers that I've already done. Now the Spoilpox Scrivenor, as I said, is a buffing unit, so he's got a good couple of aura powers, and we'll just discuss those quickly before we go into the build. Now the Spoilpox Scrivenor is an HQ unit of only power level 4, so he's pretty cheap, especially when you look at his points. The Spoilpox Scrivenor himself is only 75 points. Now that's a relatively cheap HQ, so if you're looking to sort of fill out detachments and so on that require HQs, could be a valid choice for a Nurgle Demon force, or an allied or combined force with your Plague Marines. So his stat line then, he has a move of 5 inches, which is relatively standard for Nurgle, weapon skill of 2+, a ballistic skill of 2+, strength 5, toughness 5, 4 wounds, 3 attacks, a leadership of 8 and a save of 6 up. He has a number of different weapon options here, so he comes with Disgusting Sneezes, which is pretty disgusting really. It's like a pistol D3 shot of 6-inch range, strength 3 AP 0 and a 1 damage, but you get reroll wound rolls of 1 for that weapon. In close combat then, he has a couple of different options. He has a Distended Maw, which when you see the build you'll see he has a rather large mouth. So that's a melee, it's strength of user, so strength 5, AP -1 and 1 damage, and again you can reroll wounds of a 1 for that weapon. And then finally a Plague Sword, strength of user, AP 0, damage 1, and you can reroll failed wounds for this weapon. So that's all of them rather than just failed rolls of a 1. His abilities then, he's demonic, so he comes with an invulnerable save. Disgustingly resilient, which is standard across most Nurgle units, so he gets that 5+ additional save even against mortal wounds. And demonic ritual, so he can summon demons. He comes with Stern Taskmaster. Now this is one of the first buff units to Plaguebearer infantry models, and that gives any unit within 6 inches, any Plaguebearer infantry unit within 6 inches, an extra 2 inch to their movement. Now Nurgle stuff is normally pretty slow, so getting an extra bit of movement can make a big difference to the unit itself. Also comes with Keep Counting, Meet Your Quota, and that is an add 1 to all hit rolls made for Plaguebearer units within 6 inches of 1 or more friendly models with this ability. In addition, if you make a hit roll of a 7+, i.e. getting a natural 6, which you're adding 1 to, for a Plaguebearer unit within 6 inches of this model, you can immediately make 1 additional attack at the same target with the same weapon. So yeah, it's a double buffer unit to Plaguebearer infantry, but note that Keep Counting, Meet Your Quota rule will work against all Plaguebearer units. So there are a couple of other things in there, although they are a little bit quicker for this guy to keep up with. But remember, you can always advance these units just to keep them in check and keep them within range of other units. His faction keywords then are Chaos, Nurgle and Demon, and his keywords Character, Infantry, Plaguebearer, Herald of Nurgle, and Spoilpox Scrivenor. So yeah, he's a bit of a buff unit. So keeping him around for those 75 points could be quite handy, especially if you run a large blob of Plaguebearers. So the other units that he's going to buff then, because of this Plaguebearer Keep Counting, Meet Your Quota, it's going to be Epidemus, or Epidemius, however you want to pronounce it, and the Poxbringer. Both of those have Plaguebearer keywords, as well as Horticulous Slimux. So other HQ options that you're going to be able to give this extra +1 to hit rolls for Plaguebearer units. So there are a couple of other little buffs in there as well, but the big one for me I think is being able to add 2 inches to Plaguebearer infantry. So yes, if you could really make a good little Plaguebearer infantry character kind of blob, and just to try and maximise his abilities and auras. But realistically, I think really you are talking about large blobs of Plaguebearer infantry. So yeah, he's got a couple of good buffs in there. But let's get on and build the model. So first thing to note then, it does come in one of these clan packs, which are an absolute pain in the backside to open up. And the front sheet there that you can see that contains the image, on the reverse side of that actually contains the instructions to build the model. It's a single sprue with a single base, so it's not exactly going to be a rocket science build, but just for thoroughness, you know, that's what this channel is all about, making sure that everything is as covered as best I can. We'll just crack into the clamshell and try and put this thing together. But as usual, if you're familiar with my channel, that I do tend to speed through some of the sections that are a bit repetitive, So for example, opening this clan pack, I do speed through bits that are a bit easy to follow. So you can always slow it down if you want to see how I open a clan pack, but I'm sure you don't. As you can see, this is the sprue. Not that many pieces on it, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces. Quite well detailed, to be honest. So you've got sort of a main body with a leg section on it, then you've got a separate leg which contains a waist belt with his plague sword on it. You've got the part with his big distended maul on it. You've got an arm with a quill written on it, which is what he uses to write on that giant scroll work where he's obviously keeping his quota. So yeah, quite a few pieces really, but not that easy to put together, as we'll see. There's a couple of little gotchas when you come to put the guy together. But as usual, I'll speed through this rest of this section as we move into the next part of the build. So it's a case of just clipping out the rest of the pieces on the frame and then cleaning them up. Now I'm not going to show cleaning them up. If you want to see any of my other builds, I often do a little bit of cleanup. But these parts are quite fiddly, so trying to get the scalpel in and remain on camera wasn't that straightforward. So we skip through here just to show the actual physical assembly. Now always test fit the plastic, because the instructions aren't super clear on this guy, I found. It looks like that the body should be a bit more twisted round, but that's not how sort of this head section bit goes together. So always have a little fiddle around with the plastic to make sure that you know exactly how it's all going to go together before you break out the glue. So yeah, there's a couple of little weird bits as you put this together that just didn't seem to fully match the instructions, in my opinion. But that could just be me being a little bit old and being a bit thick. But yeah, on the whole, always test fit, especially with little character models like this. Because as we move into this next section, we're putting on this back leg. Now this is the bit that's got a belt section and so on. But actually, trying to line that up to the back part of the body wasn't easy, because it sort of sits at a funny angle. So what I did was skip to the next section of the instructions, so part 3 of the instructions, where you put the large distended maw, which contains sort of the front torso part of the model on. And actually putting that on first actually made putting the rear leg on a lot easier, which seems counterintuitive. You normally think Games Workshop have tried and tested their instructions, but in this case I found it far easier to put the front section on before doing the leg. So doing sort of part 1, then part 3, and then part 2 of the instructions. So once that main part has began to sort of set and dry, you can sort of feel with your hands how well that's going off. There's quite a lot of contact points on that, so it's easy to move on to the next section. Now, grabbing the hold of the leg again, and you can see that little notch in the back of that main body. Now, that little notch is fully formed when the two halves of the body are put together, but the instructions say to put this bit on before you do that front, and you're only relying on half a notch for it to connect. And actually, it didn't sort of naturally fit, but now, as you can see, it fits perfectly, and a lot better to do it in this order. Forgive the camera, it seems to have got a little bit out of focus as we get to this section. I think I'm a little bit close to the lens. But yeah, as you can see, this now lines up and goes in just right once you've done it in that slightly odd order. Now the next section we're going to put on the large scroll. Now this is attached at 2 points. One to his left hand, which is sort of sticking out backwards, and the other half attaches to the base. And it's got a large sort of flat section on the bottom of the scroll for where it sort of joins that base. This took a little bit of test fitting just to make sure I knew exactly what was going on. And instead of just finishing the build off of the base, it was actually a lot easier to glue the model to the base. This led to a couple of problems, which I'll come to in a second as we continue through the video. But as you can see, there's sort of the other arm is sort of reaching out to the top of that scroll, and there's a little flat section on the bottom of this, as you can see, as we try and sort of test fit it badly there, try and test fit it to the arm. But as I said, because that contact point on the arm is a little bit weak, it's far easier to now attach it to the base to complete the this part of the build. And this leads on to another point of contention with the build. So you've got this large base to put him on, but you need to be very careful about where you position him on the base, because putting him central at this point is actually going to do you no favours. He does need to be further to, as we look at this image, to the left, and I do make an adjustment as we go through. Now this is because the bottom half of that scroll contains little nurgling on the bottom of the scroll. It's a 2-part scroll, and if you leave the model in the centre of the base, that nurgling on that other piece will actually hang over the edge of the base. And obviously we don't want that to happen, do we? Because it will cause storage problems and and just not look aesthetically pleasing. So as the main models began to dry a little bit, which as I said is a little bit problematic because I do need to move it in a second, we can now attach the scroll to that back arm and to the base itself. As you can see, those quite clearly there, those two contact points. You've got that top bit of his upper arm there, and then the base. So it's just a case of dolloping a little bit of glue in each of those. So one on the arm and one's on the bottom of that scroll work, and then sliding that into position on the base, just like this. So now that scroll is attached to the arm and the base, we can take the second half of the scroll, which is this little bit here that contains a little nurgling sat on the end of it. And this sort of covers over that junction point on the base of that scroll. As you can see, just by lining it up there, the nurgling actually overhangs the base. So I do need to sort of force this round. So it hasn't been, the glue hasn't fully dried, it hasn't begun to fully bond. And just need to push that back round the base and just slightly re-glue it as well, because it became sort of a little bit weakened by doing that. But yeah, this was a little bit annoying because you just can't really tell how far or where the position of the model should be in order to get this little nurgling on the end of the scroll on. But once it's sort of vaguely about right, which is about there, the nurgling isn't completely overhanging. I think maybe the base might be a little bit too small for this model. Maybe it's worth adding a slightly bigger base, but yeah, as you can see, I wasn't completely happy with the way that nurgling was overhanging there. As you can see, the glue's not 100% bonded, just retouching it there. So if you are doing this model, make sure that you push the Scrivener model, the main two legs, as far to that left as you possibly can with that scroll. Just because adding this little bit here, you don't want it overhanging, and once I've moved it to that final position, that's a lot better. So it's just a case of adding the glue now and then sticking that little nurgling and the end of that scroll onto the base now that I'm happy with that final position. And as you can see quite clearly, it now no longer overhangs. I'm just using my scalpel blade to get in between the Scrivener's little legs so that I can push the end of the scroll so that it lines up nicely with the other half of the upstanding piece. And there we go. All we've got now to do is add his right arm, left as you look at the screen, which has got the scroll on it. And it's a very small point of contact. There's like his wrist attaching to the lower part of his arm. It's very difficult to do that whilst on camera. As you can see, it's quite a fiddly little piece. So all I've done is just gone ahead and glued that on. I'm sure you can work it out, but that's all it is. It's just like on the underside of that scroll thing is his wrist joint, and just glue that on. And there we go. That is the guy fully complete and ready for painting. So all I've done now, guys, is just taken 3 pictures of the guy using my stills camera now, so that you can actually get a better view of the detail, a little bit close up. And you can see that fully engraved scroll work there. I think that looks really quite cool. And lots of detail with this weird head piece that he's got. And you can see that little nurgling sat there on the base. This is the view from the back end of him, so you can see lots of little wounds and sores and other little things crawling all over him. I think he's quite an ugly little critter. But I think he's very fitting for a Nurgle force. He got no idea where this kind of thing came from. It's not like Plaguebearers, which looked like they may have been human at one point. This guy does look completely and utterly a mess. And as you can see, it's got a good view there of his distended maw, and you can see all that detail there on the scroll. I think it's an amazing amount of detail they get into these single clan pack figures these days. So yeah, looking forward to getting some paint onto this guy and adding him to my Plaguebearer unit. So there we go then, guys, that's going to wrap this video up. We are fully assembled now, ready for adding some paint to this little guy. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Have you built this guy? Did you have the same kind of problems as I did, or was I just being really, really bad at assembling easy figures? Now for me, I found it a little bit tricky. Certainly found that gotcha of the order of build. So doing instruction 1 and 2 made no sense when it came to attaching that rear leg. Far easier to attach that central body with the teeth part on it. Before doing that rear leg, but maybe that's just me, but that's what I found. So if you do get to do this model yourself, have a look at this and see what you think before you start getting the glue out. If you want, let me know in the comment section how you feel this guy. Is he really worth it in a Nurgle demon army? I think he's got a good place, but until I start looking at some of the other characters to see if they've got any stronger buffs, I'm looking at, you know, the combination of the Feculent Gnarlmaw, for example, which allows units to sort of move and advance and assault if they start their turn within 7 inches of the tree. So, and then adding this little fella to that unit, you could really make quite a bit of distance across the board and then get into combat, which is where you really want Plaguebearers to be. So a combination of those three looks reasonably strong at the moment for not that many points. But as I said, let me know in the comment section what you think of this little guy and how he fits in your army. Hope you enjoyed the video, hope you learned something new. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you guys on the next video.